Hello everyone, and welcome back to another solo spooky story. My name's Rob, and today I'm going to be telling you a lovely little short story about something that has intrigued and caused me all sorts of bewilderment for years. Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know, these episodes are a little bit shorter, it's just one-sided, me just telling you a story basically. There's no kind of commentary from Suze or anyone else that we might have on talking about it. It's me just telling you, the listener, a story for 10-15 minutes at a time. And yeah, these are a fun format. Lots of people seem to like them, so I think it's pretty much established now that this is its own series going forward every other week, and is a nice kind of segue back to our paranormal roots. The last few weeks, both on the main episodes and the short stories, we've been talking a lot of UFOs, a lot of aliens, lots of just out there X-Files sort of paranormal stuff. We're bringing it back though this week. We're coming back into, as I said, our paranormal roots, bringing it back to a good old-fashioned ghost story. And what a ghost story this is. It's one of probably the most famous spots in Ireland, I think, actually, for a ghost story. And it's one of those places that when you see a lot of videos online, a lot of reels on Instagram, and I believe a lot of TikToks. It's pretty famous. A lot of people talk about it. But then talking to people in Ireland, a lot of people also have their own stories about this place, their own opinions. My own kind of family members have talked about this spot. So it's, very well known in Ireland. Maybe not so much outside of Ireland, but very much not the case in Ireland. You kind of hear a lot of people talking about it all the time, a lot of stories about it. Everyone kind of just knows the name of this place, and they're all, very, very familiar with, or at least know it's a haunted place. And I am, of course, as you'll have seen in the title, I'm talking about Leap Castle. Leap Castle is this very cool place in County Offaly, which is in the Midlands, and it just looks like your quintessential castle. Big stone building, very kind of classic sort of castle look. I guess it's got the turrets, parapets, that sort of stuff. If you picture a castle, I suppose a kind of a later era castle, not a kind of like medieval knight sort of thing, it's Leap Castle basically. If you kind of picture that's what you've got. So pretty cool spot, very interesting history, and it's something that we will get into. The exact origins of this castle's construction are a little bit debated, I suppose, among the archaeological community, the historical community, but I think the general kind of agreement is that it was built around 1250 AD, so 13th century. Lots going on in Ireland at the time. The Vikings have kind of come here already. They've done their thing. The Brits are kind of starting to stir a little bit as well. It's a very interesting time. Christianity is in Ireland. It's kind of a tumultuous time in Irish history, but a very, very interesting time. And yes, so this castle was built around 1250 AD by the O'Bannon clan, and they were secondary chieftains under the ruling O'Carroll clan. So these were basically kind of secondary chieftains. I don't need to explain what that is. Co-rulers, assistant to the regional rulers basically. And they had this castle. It's obviously not as grand as say the bigger castles would have been that were obviously run by the main rulers, but still fairly cool for itself anyway. So the original castle has obviously been built upon and upgraded and changed over the years, but the kind of initial building was there from 1250. And then moving on then, jumping forward about 300 years or so, after the death of Mulrooney O'Carroll in 1532, there was, to put it lightly, a violent struggle for leadership. And what ensued was this insane infighting within the O'Carroll family itself, the main rulers. They basically couldn't be around each other for long periods of time. They were fighting for their own control, fighting for their own power, trying to establish one above the other sort of thing, and that there would be one overall lead O'Carroll basically who would take over and continue ruling as the main chieftains in the area. This all led to what is now known as the infamous Bloody Chapel incident within Leap Castle. So the Bloody Chapel incident is basically, there was a family mass for the O'Carrolls. There's, Irish people, we love a good mass. Even back then, 1500s, love a good mass. 16th century mass was obviously very different to what we have now, but all the same, mass is still mass. So there's a family mass going on, and seems to be fine initially, but then one of the O'Carroll brothers decides to kill another one of his brothers in this chapel. And the other one of his brothers just so happened to be the priest who was saying mass. So immediately, this would bring up some red flags. You're not only after killing someone in mass, a member of the clergy, but also your own brother. So it's kind of like 3 strikes basically. And that is what happened. So by this priest being murdered there by his own brother, this room got known as the Bloody Chapel going forward. Jumping forward then another 100 years or so, in 1642, Leap Castle came into the possession of the Derby family through marriage. The Derbys were English in their descent, and they played a pretty significant role in the castle's history, pretty much from this point onwards, right up to the Irish Civil War in 1922. So they pretty much went kind of unrestricted in their ruling of the castle for a good 280 years, which is pretty impressive when you think about it, like one family kind of going through all those generations. And yeah, they basically were there right through to, as I said, the Civil War in 1922 and what is effectively the dawn of modern Irish times. And then in modern times then, during the Civil War, the castle was burnt down in 1922. I'm not 100% certain for the reason why it was burnt down, but I would assume it has something to do with the fact that it was a building linked to the British aristocracy. That might have something to do with it. There could be other reasons for it. I believe the IRA may have been involved in something around this area as well, but all I know is it was burnt down in 1922. At some point then, over the last 100 years or so, the castle has been primarily restored to what it used to look like, and it's now currently privately owned by Irrelevant. The key thing about this, though, is that it's still open to the public for tours, and they allow visitors to kind of come in, explore, and stay the night and things like that. But obviously, you have to pay money for that now, which I can't get on board with. So yeah, like to say that Leap Castle's history is interesting is an understatement. It's marked by family feuds, battles, and, to top it all off, some very, very interesting ghost stories, making it a pretty fascinating site for anyone that's kind of interested in Irish history and folklore, kind of spooky, paranormal nature to things. Definitely an interesting one to check out. So just to give you a kind of a flavour of the ghost stories that are associated with Leap Castle, I won't get into them all. There are quite a lot. There's quite a lot of detail to all of these, so I won't touch on them now. It's not what this episode is about. This is a short episode. This is just to intrigue you. It's kind of like a little bit of an aperitif, an appetizer for maybe a larger episode to come, or for you to go look into it yourself. So there are 5 main stories coming out of Leap Castle, and I'll go through each one of them briefly. So I suppose the one that we've already discussed is the Bloody Chapel. This is where that infamous incident occurred, the murder of a priest by his own brother during mass. That obviously immediately sets off alarm bells, and you can expect kind of spooky shit to come out of this. And lo and behold, as a result of this, it's been said that the priest's spirit is still seen in the chapel, and lights and ghostly figures have been actually reported there throughout history, which is really interesting. Also, not remotely surprising. If you're killing a priest in a church, I'm pretty certain it's fair game for ghosts. Moving on then, we have something called the Elemental, which does not match the tone at all, by the way, for a haunted Irish castle. You just have something here called the Elemental. It genuinely is like something straight out of the Marvel universe. This is a really interesting, spooky, paranormal sort of creature, because this thing known as the Elemental is described as a shadowy figure the size of a sheep with a human, or I suppose rather inhuman face. And it's said to emit a foul smell and instill a sense of dread. And the entity has actually been encountered by actually quite a few people, including Mildred Darby, who is part of that British aristocracy that ruled ruled for a time here, but those 280 years. So Mildred Darby actually is a source of a lot of these kind of ghost stories. So she, being a former resident, would have stayed there and became quite familiar with what was going on there. So she actually documented her kind of eerie encounters, I suppose, if you want to call them that. So she described how at night there was something heavy that would lie on people's beds and it would snore. And she also described the Elemental, this creature that we had just talked about. And she then went on to say that another creature would basically press its entire body weight against them in a bedroom. So you'd kind of wake up in the middle of the night and you'd have this like heavy weight pressed against you. But maybe you're not able to see it, or you don't know what it is. So that's kind of terrifying. I have actually had a similar experience to this before, which turns out to be sleep paralysis. Anyone who's had it before knows the exact feeling I'm talking about. But all the same, it's a terrifying experience regardless of whether or not it's paranormal. But sleep paralysis in a castle, it immediately is just going to get your mind flowing for, what it could be. So then moving on, we've got, as I said, the Bloody Chapel, the Elemental. The next one that we have is the murdered woman. Very on point. I don't really need to describe this one too much. This is the spirit of a woman who was murdered in the castle and is now said to haunt the premises. So her story is basically one of many that kind of contributes to this overall feeling in the castle of there being unrest. A lot of people have said that when they go to certain rooms in the castle, they feel very uneasy. There's this feeling of dread or tragedy in the air, as I saw described online. And people just feel very uneasy in the castle. They don't like being in certain rooms, and you get all the usual, cold spots and things like that as well, noises. But I think the thing that stands out about this is that general sense of dread and unease is prominent here, and a lot of it is attributed to this murdered woman, the spirit of this woman in particular, who instills, I suppose, this sense of dread in others. And then kind of going hand in hand with the murdered woman, there's another spirit known as the Red Lady. And she's a really interesting apparition because obviously she's, as has been described, a red lady, but she's also often seen holding a dagger, which is really terrifying. I just, even trying to imagine waking up, seeing a ghostly apparition, but then that ghostly apparition's also holding a dagger. You don't know if you're about to get haunted or get shanked. So it's going to be a no from me. So legend has it that she was held captive in the castle and that she actually gave birth while she was held captive. And that child then was actually killed afterwards. So her spirit is now said to roam the castle. And unlike the murdered woman who gives this sense of dread, her entity, the Red Lady, her presence gives off this deep sense of sorrow, but also rage. So people have said that when they kind of feel her spirit around them, or, if she's nearby, they can feel her anger coming from her. So they feel like they're in danger, basically, that there's this sense of like rage coming off her, and that she's effectively, they feel like she's seeking revenge for the death of her child. Totally understandable. And you definitely understand why she has that dagger. She's obviously just looking for the family who's responsible for holding her captive. Final room then, or the final area of Lep Castle that's supposedly haunted, is my favorite named room of all the castle, the murder hole room, where supposedly a person was murdered in this room. There was now a blood stain on the floor, naturally, and as a result, this room is haunted, and it's now called the murder hole room, which is phenomenal, like A+ naming. So that's a whistle stop tour, a very, very quick tour of Lep Castle. I know I've kind of flown through this one, given the history, given the hauntings, the spookiness, described everything going on. But honestly, like there's quite a lot to this, but it's one of those things, as I said, I'd like you to kind of read into this more. There's so much more to each of these creatures, each of these entities, that, you can all go off and read about it yourself and kind of read more into it. Or if you're in Ireland or planning on ever going to Ireland on holidays, I would definitely recommend you consider this one on your list of places to visit. It's definitely a super interesting place, and it also just looks cool. So, you could definitely get some pretty cool pictures of the castle itself, even if you don't go in. But yes, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope whatever time of the day you're listening to this, whenever it is, that you're having a good day, a good morning, whatever it is. And, if you have enjoyed this episode, if you've enjoyed this topic, do reach out to us on Instagram at the spookyaf pod, or on Gmail at the spookyafpodcast@gmail.com. Reach out to us, let us know what you think. If there's any topics you'd like us to cover in future, any guests that you'd like us to have on. We have had guests now, so we have upcoming guest episodes as well. If there's anyone that you'd like us to talk to, or any areas that you'd like us to look into, do let us know. Or, just say hi. We'd love that as well. We do get some interaction from some people giving us ideas, but we don't get a lot of people just saying hi. How are you? So reach out, let us know what you think, and we'll catch you in the next episode, guys. Take it easy.